Jamie Moore, welcome.
Thank you.
I want to begin by asking around the weekend, obviously, big boxing event in Manchester. How was that for you?
Yeah, good. Busy night. It was obviously 4 fights on, and going into fight week's always sort of quite a stressful environment, you know, arranging everything what's got to be done. So when you've got 4 fights on, it's obviously much more difficult. By the time you get into the sort of Thursday evening, Friday for the weigh-in, then it gets really difficult. But we've got a good team around us, you know, got plenty of people helping out, and yeah, we got through it.
What do you mean it gets difficult?
Well, just like making weight is, for a fighter, is probably the worst part, because when you're used to being a fighter, the fighting bit's the easy bit. You know, stuff like making the weight and being disciplined, and the actual. So there's a difference between getting your weight down and then making weight, because you sort of carb depletion and cutting your fluids down and stuff. So knowing how to do it, when to get it right, and the timing of it all, getting it right for the weigh-in on the Friday. So Thursday you would generally start the cut, and then Friday you jump on the scales. Hopefully you've hit weight within 30 minutes of the weighing time, and then you've got to sort of get your weight back up within the next sort of 24 to 30 hours or whatever it is from the weigh-in to the fight. So managing that process it's a lot of trial and error over the years. So it's not easy to do. So it's very stressful, and times it by 4, then you've got a problem. Add to it, the Kimpton Clockhouse Hotel is like a bloody maze. So like I've got 4 different hotel rooms, 4 different fighters, all making weight at the same time for the same weigh-in, in different parts of the hotel, on different levels, different floors, and did about 26,000 steps on Friday. But it was all good in the end.
Did you find that difficult as a boxer yourself? Can you relate to the athlete?
Yeah, making weight's horrendous. Like I had some awful struggles making weight, and in all honesty, we was probably part of the guinea pigs on the way it's done now. Is like similar to the way we was doing it, but better. So all the trial and error stuff what we did is now being put into practice, so that it's a lot safer for the fighters. But I mean, the worst one I ever did was like I lost 20 pounds in 20 hours to make weight for when I fought Ryan Rhodes. So, and it's probably the only description was like it felt like I was dying, like it was awful. So as you can imagine, it wasn't my best performance, and I lost that fight because just purely, not taking into account Ryan Rhodes is a very, very good fighter. But add to that the pains of making weight and the depletion what it takes out of you is you virtually got no chance.
Why do boxers do that? So for people that might be listening or watching who are a bit oblivious to that weigh-in, why do they do it?
Because so there's weight categories for a reason, so that the fights are fairer, and basically, like in any sport, wherever you can try and gain an advantage, that's what you do. One of them in boxing is trying to make sure you're as big and as strong as you possibly can against your opponent. One of the ways to do that is to cut your weight so that you're weighing at whatever you got to weigh in on the official weigh-in, and then after that it doesn't matter. So then you can weigh whatever you want. So average fighters will just cut weight maybe within a 24 to 36 hour period. You're talking 8 to 10 pound, maybe more, and then put it back on. So some fighters might only be able to do 6 or 7, and that's where you've got your advantage, because then going into the fight. Now, in all honesty, the trial and error thing, some people are quite comfortable doing 10, 12 pounds and feel absolutely normal the next day. Some people can only do 6 or 7 because it depletes them so badly. So it's literally every individual is different, and you have to get that balance right of making sure you don't take too much out of yourself, making weight so that you're as strong as you possibly can. Because a lot of people think if they're heavier, it's going to be better. but it's not necessarily true. You know, you want to be able to perform from an athletic performance point of view, the best to your ability. And that is generally, those last 2 weeks of you performing in the gym is your best performance weight. And if that's going to be 10 or 12 pound above the weighing weight, you don't want to be 16, 18, 20 pound heavier after the weigh-in, because you're just going to be sluggish. So it's about getting the balance right.
You know, you mentioned then around the final 2 weeks coming up to a big event is where you kind of see peak performance occur.
Yeah.
Do you get a sense whether a fighter's ready or not going
Yeah,
into
absolutely.
into a competition?
And sometimes you tend to have the problem with more disciplined athletes more often than you do with the ones that aren't, where you'll start to see them peaking earlier than you would ideally want them to, because they're so on it.
Yeah.
And I believe a job, or my job, or a coach's job, is to have the experience or the understanding to notice that, know when to say to him, you know, you need to take your foot off the gas, settle, don't do anything, we just need to stay where we are. And it's difficult, it's a hard job to do, because a fighter or an athlete will always have the urge to train, because it's what they've been doing for years and years. And to tell them to take the foot off the gas coming into a big event without them sort of getting paranoid about they're not doing enough, it's not an easy job to do. So you have to have a good understanding and a trust and a good bond with your coach for me to be able to go, please trust me on this one. Don't do anything for the next 2 days. Watch what you're eating, rest. I'm not saying sort of take your foot off the gas totally, but just don't do anything. You need a good rest. And hopefully, thankfully, I've got those types of relationships with my fighters that where they understand. I mean, I've been there. I've been a professional fighter myself, so I understand the importance of training. And Oliver Harrison, my coach, God bless his soul, he was unbelievably good at the understanding of rest and how important that is to an athlete, as much as the actual training. Because Kerry Kays is another absolute legend of the game, and unbelievable nutritionist, strength coach. He's our cutsman now. But he used to explain it to us in simple terms, like 1, 2, 3. He'd literally say to you, why are you training? What is your goals? Where do you want to get to? You know, so the general answer is you want to be fitter, faster, stronger than where you are now. And he said, number one is doing the actual training for the goal, so getting fitter, faster, stronger. Number 3 is you actually getting fitter, faster, stronger. Your number 2 is your rest and recovery. And if you don't get number 2 right, you will never get to number 3. So he said you need to understand the value and the importance of that number 2. So when somebody explains it to you in layman's terms like that, it makes you understand it better. Like boxers, without trying to, you know, sort of not do them justice, don't have a massive academic background, and you need to explain things in layman's terms. You know, there's no point going all scientific and too deep with the vast majority of us, because we won't understand it. Kerry Kays was the best I've ever come across at explaining it to you in layman's terms, so you understood it. So you understood it from quite an advanced point of view, but he put it in layman's terms.
It's interesting how you say that, of performance requires discipline, but rest also requires discipline as well.
Absolutely.
In terms of taking
probably more so
off.
Because athletes will happily train in their discipline, whatever area it is, because they love doing it. They don't love sitting around, resting, recuperating. That's not what they do. Yeah. And I think it's harder to do that than it is to train. Active recovery is also very important, obviously, but just getting to sit and do nothing is a nightmare.
How did boxing become a passion for you then? So growing up in Salford, how did it come about?
Rocky. I loved Rocky, and my dad used to sit me in the chair when I was like 9 years old. Mike Tyson, Nigel Benn. There was his 2 favourite fighters, and he used talk about him all the time, and every time he was on the TV, he'd sit me in the chair with him, and we'd sit there and watch it, and I just loved it. I loved the drama of it. It scared me a little bit, but that was part of the sort of attraction to it.
Yeah.
And I had my first fight when I was 13, and I lost. I got stopped in the second round, and I was devastated because I was obsessed with boxing. And early on, it taught me that lesson about that self-talk, and how if you love something, if you love doing something, then it takes a lot to put you off doing it. And getting stopped in the second round in my first ever fight, and bear in mind, I'm in high school at the time, and everyone's asking me, when you're fighting, what you know, how did you go on? It's embarrassing. You know, that humiliation of losing was what really drove me to. So you have to self-analyze all the time, and losing or setbacks are the best ones. You get so many more lessons than you do when you win or you perform well, because all you really do is you sort of reassert to yourself, yeah, I'm good at that, or we've worked on that for the last 8 weeks and it worked well. The worst ones are where you have to look at yourself and analyse and go, where did it go wrong? And they're the most honest conversations you have to have with yourself, and they're the most important ones, because if you want to improve and go on and get better, you have got to be honest with yourself. There's nothing worse than a coach buttering it up for you, or you not being honest and blaming other people. You have to be honest with yourself, and those early lessons was the most important ones and the best ones, what stands you in better stead for the future.
Are you like that as a coach now, in terms of just giving the blunt truth, smack in the face, rather than, you know, you said
I feel like probably around. I think one of my best assets in terms of that is I feel like I can communicate well with people.
Yeah.
And I always tend to find a way where I'm honest, but I'm truthful. And I always see a positive. I've always been that type of glass half full person, where I've never really dwell on negatives. I always sort of tend to flip it. So I'll find a reason to find a positive in a negative situation. So whatever's happened, whatever the fighter might not have done right, I'll always find a way of telling them what they've done wrong, but find a positive and how they can fix it, or what they can do better the next time. Because I don't feel there's any point in me pulling fighters up who I train about what they've done wrong without being able to tell them how to do it right. Otherwise, what's the point? I may as well go and find a job doing something else. Yeah. So there's no point in being critical unless you're going to be given positives and the ways to fix it.
You mentioned that moment at 13. How did you overcome that? And then how did that bring a trajectory to make it as a kind of an amateur into the pro competition of boxing?
You're talking 30 odd years ago now. So when I try and think about my mindset then, it was really unbelievably one-track minded. Like, it didn't matter what I had to do. I was just so focused on going, right, I'm going to make sure I right those wrongs. And when I think about how I was, I sort of admire myself when I think about how I was then, because I didn't come from a boxing background. Nobody was teaching me how to have that mindset. It was my pride more than anything. I was like, I can't believe that's happened. What do I do? How do I get this better now? And so my next fight, so I've got an amateur boxing club in Walkden now. Where the gym is now, before that gym part of the building was built, there was a place called the Pembroke Halls. That's where I had my second fight. So my second fight was in my local area, in front of all my mates. I've lost my first fight. I'm under huge pressure at what I've put on myself to win the fight. And I won on points. It was a really good fight. I boxed Anthony Farnell, who ended up a really good professional, and he's a good mate of mine. And when I think about the amount of pressure I must have been under and how nervous I was that night.
How old would you have been here now?
I would have been 14 when I had my second fight.
Oh.
So I'm just a baby, really, when you think about it. But the confidence that gave me, sort of being able to, there was 6 months in between the two fights, the confidence it gave me, sort of fixing the wrongs, what I did, being able to go in there, and it wasn't an easy fight, it was a hard fight, and I performed in front of all my mates in my local area, and I got the win, and it was like a proud moment.
Was that like a sense of obsession from that point then? You mentioned being fixated on trying to improve and that element of not being embarrassed. Was that the obsession of?
Yeah, I won 3 fights on the trot, and then I lost again on a split, fuming. Didn't really see many things I did wrong, but there was a few things I could have done right. Went away, worked on it, put it right, and that's sort of how the amateur. That's how amateur boxing is generally.
Yeah.
But my amateur boxing career sort of went like that until I got to about 18. So when I was 15, I got caught in trouble, nicking cars. My mum gave me a right bollocking, and she basically took me to the boxing gym and stood me in front of Dave, my coach, and said, "He's been stealing cars." And Dave was like, "I'll tell you straight, if I ever hear that you've been doing anything like that," I said, "you'll never step foot in this gym again." And I promise you, it was the worst thought I could have possibly had at that point in my life, because I'd found something what I loved and what I wanted to do. Like, I'd had my careers meeting in school, and they'd said, "What, when you take your options," it was like, "What are you going to be? Do you have any idea what you're going to do?" I said, "I'm going to be a boxer." And he was like, "You can't say that." So I was like, "Why?" And it's not on the list. So I was like, well, that's what I'm going to be. And she was like, "Well, we need to pick something what's closer to what you want to do. It's not actually on the list." So she made me choose going in the army. So I was like, and I knew then that's all I wanted to do. And God, there was loads of setbacks, but nothing ever put me off for more than a day. So you have them moments where you lose a fight, and especially when I was getting to like 16, 17, my mum sent me out to work with my dad. She said, "You're not going out with your mates, you're not potentially putting yourself in a position where you're going to be out stealing cars. You go work with your dad." And my dad was delivering beer, so carrying barrels and crates around, 15 years old. And it done me the world of good, because physically I become really strong at a young age. So from like 17, 18, by the time I was moving into the seniors, I was physically very strong. And I went on a run for 3 years where I didn't lose a fight. And people was like talking, "This kid's going to be good now, Try to get England squads to see whether I could potentially get on the England squad. They just didn't want to know, because my style was not an amateur style at that point in time. It was more suited to the pros.
What do you mean by England squad? Is it Commonwealth?
Yeah,
GB? What that is?
So England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales have their own teams,
Okay.
and then a combination of those is Team GB.
Right, makes sense.
So the England squad was the first step before you go on. So we was trying to get a session to go down there and see how we was getting on. And they just wasn't interested, because my style, I was more of a professional style body puncher. Like I'd boxed a kid who was ranked number 4 in England, and Ian Irwin, who was the head of the England squad at the time, was ringside. I stopped him in the first round with a body shot, and my coach Dave went over to him and said, "What do you think about him getting down for a session with England?" And he was like, "I've not really seen that much of him." So you beat the number 4 in the country in the first round, and they still wouldn't let you get a foot in the door. So I knew early on I was never going to be the type of fighter who was going to do well in the amateurs. It was more of like an apprenticeship. I didn't really care about achieving anything in the amateurs. It was all about getting into the pros, and that was my only goal.
And when you got that goal, Did you still have that sense of drive and passion to... Does your motivation change? Maybe I'll change that question. Did your motivation change because you're hitting certain targets and then you kind of get into that bracket? How do you keep momentum to keep pushing on and training and feeling focused?
Yeah, turning pro gives the vast majority of fighters a new lease of life because it's something different, it's something new, it's that excitement. Or you know, a lot of fighters have the dream of turning professional. So when they do, for the first 12 months, you're like on cloud nine,
Are you
living
still
the
working
dream.
with your dad during this period, or is that
No. So good, nice little story actually. So Steve Wood was my manager as a professional from the start to the finish. So, and it's rare. You don't get people who have that type of loyalty and they stick from the start to the finish. But Steve, he was new to the game really. He was a local lad in Salford, and what had happened was I'd boxed in Tenerife. My last amateur fight was in Tenerife, right on the strip, in the middle of summer. And Steve was with Steve Foster ringside. Young Steve Foster was boxing on the same bill. So those two were sat ringside. I'd never met Steve Wood before, and you can't have a draw in amateur boxing. But I've boxed the Spanish champion and I battered him and they give it a draw at the end of it. So everyone was like booing, you can't have a draw. Anyway, afterwards, I goes over and Steve gets introduced to Steve Wood. So he's a professional boxing manager. And he said, why don't you come and have a sit down with us when you get back and I'll get a deal together with you. I feel like you'll be a really good pro. Right. And I'd already made arrangements with Billy Graham, who was Ricky Hatton's coach. I'd been training there for a couple of years on my days off from work, and I was going to go professional with them. And he said, and Steve Wood had said, if you come with us, we'd want you to train in our gym with Ray Farrell. And Ray Farrell was a good coach, but he was with Michael Brody, who was a European champion at the time. And I was like, oh, I'm not too sure. You know, I've already made arrangements with Billy. I goes to see Steve, and Steve says, I'll guarantee you 6 fights in your first year. I'll give you £1,000 a fight, which 25 years ago was good money. I'll get you a sponsor car, and I'll get you £400 a month sponsor money. Wow. So I was like, Jesus. Bear in mind, my last 3 amateur fights, all bad decisions, but I didn't win one after going unbeaten for 3 years. So I'm turning professional, not winning a fight in 3 fights. I know I've got a mountain to climb if I'm going to go anywhere. And Steve Wood offers me this great opportunity, and I couldn't turn it down. And I really wanted to train with Billy Graham, but I couldn't turn this sort of package deal down. So I said, right, okay, I'll do it. I went and told Billy, and he understood. He said, you know, I think you're making a mistake, but I understand why you're doing it. So for 5 fights, I was trained by Ray Farrell. We went 5-0. Steve Wood and Ray had a dispute about the gym, and they left. And Steve wanted me to stay. So Steve Foster, who he was with in Tenerife, was ringside. He was with him in the gym, and he took over my training. And Oliver Harrison, who was my coach for the rest of my career then, helped us in the gym. Up until my 13th fight, I lost my 13th fight. Steve Foster said, listen, I don't feel like I want to do this anymore. You need to go with someone different. And I went with Oliver, and he was with me as well, again, from the same as Steve, all the way to the end of my career. So it was a nice family type environment. Yeah. And you know, Steve Wood did a very good job with me. You know, I was his first British champion, and considering at that point in time he didn't have a lot of experience, he had good relationships with Frank Warren, good relationships with Frank Maloney, who was separate promoters at the time, good relationship with Barry Hearn, and I ended up boxing on all their shows. I actually had 9 fights in my first year when he promised me 6, so which you don't really see anymore. You know, people aren't that active.
Mm-hmm. Does that change you as a person then? You mentioned that element of family. Do you feel obviously it's benefited you as a performer? And you mentioned the fights, and you mentioned the surroundings and the salary and extrinsic motivation, but do you feel that changed you as a person in terms of maybe having transitional skills out the boxing gym into everyday life? Because you mentioned robbing cars back then.
Yeah.
Obviously,
listen, I had a real good family upbringing. The stealing cars thing wasn't a dysfunctional family thing. It was getting dragged into being out on the streets, young lads, sort of. At the time, it was the in thing, you know. Let's go and rob a car. It was just one of them stupid sort of adolescent things. But Oliver absolutely changed my life. Like, I can't ever be more grateful for someone for doing something for me than I am for him. In the sense of, I spent every day with that man for nearly 2 years on our own in the gym. There were no one else in the gym at the time. So Oliver had been helping Steve Foster train me for those fights in between. And when he took over as head coach, he didn't have a stable of fighters. He was just on his own. So it was just me and him in the gym. So I literally had 2 years nearly of his undivided attention. And I can't undervalue, or I can't explain the importance of how much I learned from him in those couple of years, because I now understand how difficult it is. When I've got a stable of fighters, I've got 9 professional fighters now, and managing it is very difficult. It's time consuming, and it works well because eventually we had a thriving gym at Oliver's. You know, Amir Khan came, Martin Murray, Alex Matvienko, Mark Thompson. You know, there was good fight. Rocky Fielding, Martin Murray. We all came together, and it was a great stable of fighters. But for the first couple of years, it was just us. And then as we became more successful, it started to grow. So I then started to understand the importance of a stable of fighters, because even though boxing's an individual sport, that camaraderie and that understanding from other fighters, and sort of when you're having those conversations about if you're nervous or you're worried, and you're speaking to other fighters who when you look at them on the surface of it, they don't really seem like they're worried or nervous, and they go, yeah, listen, I'm exactly the same, don't worry about it, it's fine. Those conversations are so important. So I've now, years and years later, how I've ended up with it, I don't know, because it just seems to have sort of grew legs and turned into, I've got a stable of 9 fighters, and we're having great success, and they're all good fighters, nice people, they're all helping each other, and I feel like it's been born from understanding the importance of what Oliver did, what he taught me over those first couple of years, and now I've got to try and get the balance right of being able to coach and teach the fighters what I've learned off him on a bigger scale, because we've got a real busy gym now.
Talk about bigger scales. Obviously, from that point, British champion in 2003.
Yeah, 2003, yeah.
Talk to me about the pressure and motive within that. So you mentioned that element of Oliver and support mechanisms within the process. How do you want to maybe lead up to the event itself? And
so I'd lost my 13th fight to Scott Dixon. Oliver was in the corner with us helping, but he wasn't my coach. And on the surface of it, I got stopped in the 5th round. I was fighting somebody who everyone expected me to beat, but he was an ex-Commonwealth champion and tough as old boots. And it was my 13th fight in 18 months. So I've turned professional, 20 years old. I'm now 21. I've had 12 fights in 18 months, and I'm going into my 13th, and it's a 12-rounder. Now, when I think about it in hindsight, it was too quick, because even though I was physically mature, I was probably mentally not mature enough. And I basically went out there, put Scott Dixon, he was called, I put him down in the 3rd round. I thought I had him, emptied the gas tank trying to finish him off, and I was finished. And 4th round, I was absolutely shattered. 5th round, he stopped me. On the surface of it, it just looked like I'd gassed myself out. And so talking before about being honest with yourself and watching and understanding, I was like, I need to be fitter. You know, if I was fitter, I'd have been okay. I goes to Oliver's and I ask him to coach me full time. And what the first technical session we're doing, he just talks me through it and he goes, "Why do you think you lost that fight?" So I said, "Just gassed myself out." And he went, "Not really. You're probably one of the fittest fighters I've seen. You're one of the hardest working fighters I've seen." So I was like, "Yeah, but I punched myself out." And he went, "Yeah, but you didn't get your tactics right. That's what it was." He said, "When he had you on the ropes, you didn't defend yourself properly." Now, leading up to this point, when I'd been boxing on Sky and stuff like that, the commentary was always talking about how tight my defence was. So I sort of took offence to this. And I'm like, "What do you mean? Like, people are always talking about how good my defence is." And he went, "Okay, well, what happened with Scott Dixon?" So I'm like, I'm not happy about this. So I went, "What are you talking about?" He went, "Okay, put yourself on the ropes like you was in the fight. Defend yourself." So he starts letting his hands go, like throwing punches at me. And I'm just blocking him like this. And he went, "What are you doing?" So I'm like, "What?" He went, "I said, defend yourself." I went, "I am doing." And he went, "Switch." So he goes on the ropes and he goes, "Throw shots at me." So I start throwing shots and he starts pulling his head back, slipping, dropping low, grabs me, turns me onto the ropes like that. And I'm stood there like that, and he went, "That's how you defend yourself." He went, "You're blocking. That's part of your defence. That's not defending yourself. There's loads of areas. You lost that fight because you couldn't defend yourself." And I was like, fuck. I was fucking raging. Yeah. But he was right. Yeah. And I was thinking, I ain't been honest with myself here. I'm trying to look for excuses rather than reasons. Yeah. And it was like a light bulb moment. The penny dropped. And we drilled it, and he'd have me sparring. And he'd go, "Right, for a minute, no punching. Just defend yourself." So he's got someone letting their hands go on me, full sparring, and I can't punch back. And I've just got to get through it. And the first few months I got filled in. As time went on, my judgment of whoever was letting the hands go and my judgment of distance and timing and reading their rhythm and my positioning and where my head should be, all those little things started to fall into place. And then I could go through a round if I needed to without really doing much but not getting hit, which had never been a thing for me before. So I started to understand Oliver Harrison, tactically, one of the best coaches I've ever spoke to in my life, even still now. And very, very undervalued, underrated coach. And when you combine the stuff what I've learned with him, then with conditioning, understanding about when it's important to rest, when you start adding all that stuff together, that's when I feel like you start, and you can't get that without experience. It's impossible to be able to understand those types of things without actually walking that walk yourself.
So it's repetition and habit that's got you...
Patterns. I talk about, that's one of my favourite words in the gym is patterns. So whatever you do on a daily basis, ultimately, when you're under pressure, you're going to do. Whether it's good or bad. Don't repeat the bad things, repeat the good things. Repetition is key. Yeah. It creates those neurological pathways in your brain so that I always talk about, I say, by the time you get to round 6 and you're absolutely fucked, you are not going to be able to think. You're just going to do. Whatever comes instinctively, you're going to do. And that's why you need to make sure that whatever patterns you've drilled are there. Make sure they're inbuilt in you, because if not, you're going to be found wanting.
Going into that fight with Macklin then, did you feel maybe you were a complete boxer based on the rinse and repeat of analysing, become better, habits, repetition? Do you kind of have that momentum and those skills where you go, okay, this is my moment now?
So I wouldn't. People talk about my in hindsight now, my career, I was in Fight of the Year 3 times, and people will always go, "Oh my God, you had some set of balls on you, you know, big heart, brave, blah, blah, blah." I wouldn't associate any of those words with me before I won the British title in 2003. I had a fight in 2002, which made me put into practice the defensive stuff what Oliver had been teaching me for over a year up to that point. A kid called Delroy Mellis, good journeyman, big strong puncher, and I was winning the fight easy, got to round 4, got nailed with a big right hand, and I really had to switch on and go into defensive mode. And it was the first time I had to put it to practice in a professional ring, and it worked. And I came through and I won the fight in the 6th round. The next time I had to do it, it was 2005. It was the 3rd fight with Michael Jones, who I'd won the British title from. And I got put down twice in the 3rd round. And I was in bad trouble. It was actually 20-year anniversary of the fight yesterday.
Okay.
That was the first time in a big fight I was under the cosh and I was in the exact same position on the ropes as I was with Scott Dixon 2001. And I got through it and I won the fight in the 6th round again. Now, it was like I didn't just get braver, I got smarter, I got fitter, I got the understanding of pacing yourself over 12 rounds. So it was all experience. And I realised it wasn't that I wasn't brave, it was that I wasn't smart or I wasn't fit. Now, because every fighter to a certain extent is brave, because they get in there in the first place. It's about knowing how to manage it when you're in there. If you just go out like an headless chicken and punch yourself out, once you're gassed, you're gassed. There's nothing you can do about it. And that's sort of the position I put myself in with Scott Dixon. When I learned how to manage it properly, it was like an awakening. So then, the year after, I'm fighting Macklin.
Yep.
I've never, ever, up until that point, had to box on the back foot. And when we started training camp, 10 weeks out from the fight, Oliver said, "How do we go about this fight?" I said, "What do you mean?" He went, "I'm just picking your brains. How do you think tactically we go about this?" So I said, "Listen, he's a big, strong kid. So maybe box him on the back foot." And he was like, "Nah, he'll run right over you." I was like, "Yeah? So what do we do?" He said, I said, "We can't like go head to head." And he went, "He probably gets here in about 3 or 4 rounds." So I'm thinking, fucking hell, are you sure we've took the right fight here? And he said, "You had to sit right in front of him, you had to make him miss, and as soon as he stops punching, you had to make him pay." And I was like, that's going to be some fight. And he was like, "Yeah." He said, "But with your style, your attributes, that's the only way you beat someone like him." So we knew from the offset the type of fight it was going to be. And I was like, it was the first time I was in Fight of the year before. So July 2005, I'm in Fight of the Year. September 2006, I ends up in Fight of the Year again. And I knew, and I kept saying to people, "I promise you, this will be Fight of the Year," because our styles can't help but blend. But they thought I was going to come and fight like I did before. And I had to be really smart, and I had to take on board all those lessons, what we'd learned in those repetition, every day, drilling the same moves, so that when I was under the cosh, when I didn't have chance to think, I just did it. And luckily it worked for us.
Brutal, wasn't it?
Absolutely brutal.
Do you ever speak about it? Do you ever kind of reminisce with old boxers about certain fights?
Do you know, I feel like that's one of them fights. I love Nigel Benn for the fact that he was always in exciting fights. And I remember doing an interview with the Manchester Evening News before my pro debut saying, "I don't really have any ambitions of winning titles or anything like that. The only thing I want is that when I retire, people say he was exciting to watch." And in all honesty, that's what I got. So when I think about how my career unfolded, couldn't be more prouder. Ultimately, that Macklin fight is like every show I go to, even now, somebody will come up to me and go, mate, that fight with you and Macklin, I watch it all the time, it's unbelievable. Now, imagine being in a sport where there's so many fights happen on a weekly basis, and that fight was nearly 20 years ago, and people are still talking to you about it now. Like, God, man, that makes me so proud to have been involved. And it was one of those fights where the winner or the loser, it doesn't really matter, because the fact that you took part in a fight like that, it was unbelievable, and I'm really, really proud to have been involved in something like that.
Did they ever get you around the table to kind of reminisce and look at old footage?
We did a IFL organised a 10-year anniversary of the fight. So back in 2016, Coogan sat and interviewed me and Macklin in Birmingham. We had an evening with me and him, and it was good. Yeah. It was like Macklin went on to, should have been a world champion, should have won the world title against Felix Sturm, had an unbelievable career, and he says the same people still talk to him about that fight all the time, even though we had bigger fights than that as his career went on. So yeah.
One thing that I wanted to kind of touch upon, and you mentioned it throughout the conversation so far, is around decision making from judges and referees. You mentioned Macklin and Stern, and I've interviewed Macklin, and he mentions controversial decisions and playing in certain, competing in certain areas based on judges. What are your thought processes on that from a career point of view, but even more today based on the decisions that happen within boxing?
Listen, these we've had two which you could say people talk about as being two of the worst ones in recent memory. It was Jack Catterall with Josh Taylor in the first fight, and it's Dave Allen with Johnny Fisher in Saudi last December. And thankfully both guys have gone and rematched them, and they've put those wrongs right. But it is a problem. The judging in boxing is a problem, and I think a lot of it is the criteria of judging in professional boxing. A lot of it's based on your opinion on how you think that round's gone, rather than it being more structured. And I feel like it's got to be more structured and more of a stricter criteria. And maybe the usage of the 10-point system could be a little bit better. Because, for instance, I don't feel like if I'm in a title fight at British level or world level, and I win a round, and I've won it, but it's been competitive, but I've won it, and it's 10-9. Or 3 years before, I've boxed a journeyman who is literally surviving, doesn't throw a punch for 4 rounds, and I get the points, and it's 10-9. I don't see how he should get 9 points, and the guy in the world title fight or the British title fight who's made it competitive but has lost the round gets 9 points as well. I feel like they can use the 9-point system better. So if I've won a round clearly at British title level, maybe it should be scored 10-8 or 10-7, and closer rounds are 10-9. That way you'd sort of eradicate, get rid of draws nearly, because everyone's perception of who's won a fight, people aren't stupid. If I win 6 rounds massively, and the other kid, people think he's won 6 rounds, but he's only just won them, the perception of who's won the fight means they're going to look at me and go, oh, you battered him for 6 rounds, but he nicked the other 6 rounds. It's a draw. And people go, there's no way he won that. But in all honesty, the way boxing is scored now, it's a draw, because it's scored round by round. But if the 10-point system was used better, if my rounds were then 10-8s because I won them clearly, and his rounds were 10-9, I'd still win, because overall I've won the battle, even though individual rounds were scored fairer. I just feel like it could be used a little bit better.
I want to ask you, coming towards the end of your career, you said throughout around kind of having a purpose, having a goal, from that kid that first one to the gym to coming to the end. How does one transition out of boxing, and how did you cope with that in terms of this is now over?
I don't think I would have coped that well with not having boxing in my life, and I understand people's struggles. I was very, very fortunate. Adam Smith, who was the head of boxing at Sky Sports at the time, took me on board as a pundit, and it really, really probably saved me in that point. And in all honesty, I was never shy. I was never work shy. And my dad was a roofer at the time. I'm guessing I probably would have gone and worked with my dad. And in all honesty, I would have missed boxing, but I would have been okay with that. I've never been the type of person who is money orientated. I'm quite happy. Like, as long as I've got food on the table, the kids had clothes on the back, got a roof over my head, I'm okay. I'm really okay. And in many ways, I've been fortunate to have a lot of money. Then I've had none. Then I've had a lot of money, and it's gone like that. And I promise you, it's never made me happy. It's given me opportunities to do nice things, but in loads of situations, I've realised that money's awful. It's the root of all evil, and I feel fortunate to have been both sides of it. But like amateur box, I've set an amateur boxing club up with Charlotte Gilley, who runs Maverick Stars Trust, unbelievable charity, who do great things with the community. Like during lockdown, there was feeding communities all over. You know, kids who was out of school, they wasn't allowed in school at the time, and we was doing stuff where it was fit and fed, where they could come to the gym and give food out. They do unbelievable work. I set that amateur boxing club up, and we set it up between us, invested in the community, because I know the value of boxing, and my area is one of those areas where if the kids don't have something to do, they're going to get themselves in trouble. I was a prime example of it, and I promise you, we've been really looking at when I retired. So we've gone off tangent there, but I retired and went sort of working for Sky, ended up falling into the coaching, doing Steve Wood and Tommy Coyle a favour. Tommy Coyle was my first fighter, and in many ways will always be one of my favourite, if not the favourite, because he was the first one. But I never intended to get into coaching. I just ended up helping him out, and then it sort of grew legs. And when Oliver, my coach, got sick, he asked me to take over with Martin Murray and Rocky Fielding. And then once we had a couple of fighters in the stable, it just grew legs and grew legs. But the amount of stuff we've achieved in a short period of time, I mean, you could say I've been coaching 12 years, but in all honesty, it's more like 8. The first 4 was just Tommy, and then we've had a full stable of fighters. And we've, Jack Catterall should have been undisputed champion. He's had some massive wins against world-class fighters. Chantel Cameron was undisputed world champion. We went to Dublin and beat Katie Taylor. Rocky Fielding went to Germany, won a world title. Tommy Cole was Commonwealth champion. Like, we've had loads and loads of success. I promise you, the best thing I've ever done is open that amateur boxing club, because we've been open 4 years now, and the amount of kids who've come up to me, or the parents have come up to me saying, "Mate, thank you so much for opening this gym. It's the best thing what's ever happened to my kid." Like, you can't put a value. So I just spoke about money being the root of all evil. When you're in a position when you can do something like that, I feel like you should always do it. And that's where the value in money is. Not the actual money, but giving people opportunities to change their lives, because the kids in our area don't get that many chances to change their lives. They're literally going to go down the same route as what everyone else has, where they finish school, they don't really have that many qualifications, they get whatever job they can, and they just tread water for the rest of their life. And hopefully they find someone who they can do life with, and they love them, and they're happy and content. And the vast majority of them can't. And boxing, it gives them structure, gives them discipline, gives them work ethic, gives them motivation, it gives them a sense of belonging and well-being. And they look forward to coming to that boxing gym more than anything else in their life. So to be able to be in a position to give someone that, it's the best thing I've ever done in boxing, regardless of what I've done as myself or what we've done as coaches. by far the best thing.
There's a better escapism as well. There's a big emphasis, I always think, on team sports like football and rugby and other sports. But I always think boxing has a better escapism because of that psychological welfare of getting it out of your system.
Of course.
And sense of discipline and controlling that anger as well.
Yeah.
I think that goes missed. I think people don't recognise it as much as they should.
Giving the kids the tools to control their emotions is a huge tool for them to have. And like I lived through the part of the era when teachers in school would give you the belt. Yeah. So you do as you're told, or you got your legs slapped. And then they brought in, it was illegal. I saw the change from the behaviour in kids from where they went, the kids started going, why were you going to do? You can't do that. You can't do nothing to me. Instead of, the teacher would go, do that again, I'm going to smack your legs. And they go, I don't want my legs smacking. I don't think you should smack kids' legs. But the story I told before, when my amateur coach said to me, you do that again, you're not coming in this gym. The fear of me not being able to go back in the gym will stop me from doing it. In boxing's one of the only sports where if you don't do as you're told, you're going to get hurt. And it's the rawest form of discipline. I'm not saying teachers should be able to smack kids' legs, but the fear of them doing it is what used to stop you from not doing as you're told and being disciplined. And now that's gone. And I don't know how you bring it back, but boxing is still there where people can use it as a tool, as discipline.
Well, you've kind of elaborated on it then, but final question, Jamie. What's the next couple of years look like? You mentioned obviously your boxing gym, potential punditry as well, reminiscing and kind of learning from your life experiences. That's what there's. Well, can you just maybe let viewers and listeners know?
I'm a big believer in everything happens for a reason. So I genuinely mean, like, whatever comes for me comes for me. But the only thing I want to do, I've got a big passion for helping people. The reason I'm coaching people is because I didn't want to do it as a job. It was because Steve Wood and Tommy asked me to help him, and I wanted to help him. And then as a knock-on effect, it's like a byproduct. You get paid for it. So it's the best job in the world for me. But like, say for argument's sake, I won 100 million quid tomorrow on the Euro Millions. I'd still coach people because I love doing it and I like helping fighters. I want to pass on what I've learned. I don't want them to make the mistakes I made. But by the same rule, I would just help as many people as I could, because I think people think, wow, why you've done that? It's so unselfish of you to open a boxing gym. You know, you've done it out of the goodness of your heart. And we have done it from a good place, but it's very selfish in many ways, because how it makes me feel, the amount of pride it gives me, it's very selfish in a way, isn't it? You know, sort of like I've been in a position to be able to give that to these kids, but the feeling I get when I walk in that gym and I see them, you get kids who come in, the first couple of times they come, they won't even look you in the eye, and I'm like, you okay? I am, mate, you all right? And I make him shake my hand. And I go, you should show respect to people. Someone says hello to you, you should say hello back. You look people in the eye. We have these little conversations with the kids. Within a couple of months, they're coming in, and we don't always shake hands. They'll give you like a little knuckle bump, but they'll come in and go, hello, Jamie. And then when they go in, thank you, Jamie. And it's like, it's the best thing to see that transformation from a kid who's either lacking confidence or he's got a bit of a chip on his shoulder, won't look you in the eye. On the way out, a few months later, he's coming over to you, actively going, thank you. Like, it's the best thing in the world.
Jamie, I just want to say thank you for helping me. Obviously,
no
you mentioned
problem.
Your boxing gym.
Yeah.
What we'll do is, in the description of this podcast, we'll put the links and the charity work that you mentioned, where your gym is, all in the description. So if anyone's listening or watching, they can go and check that out.
Love that.
One thing that sticks in my brain when you were talking then is that element of a difference between a goal and a purpose. I think some athletes struggle with that. So people have a goal, or athletes have a goal of wanting to achieve X, Y, and Z. But with you have a purpose on
it's got to be a reason
and support
yeah
people.
there's got to be a reason.
And I think that has helped you based on your career and your overview.
See, I always thought my career was my career, but when I think about it now, it was like an apprenticeship for this. And who's to say that this isn't an apprenticeship for something else, what's in the future? So that's what I mean. I'm open to whatever comes.
I just want to, like I said, you've helped me out, and obviously we've only known each other shortly, and I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Oh no, I've enjoyed it.
And good luck with everything as well.
Thank you. Cheers,
mate.
Top man, thank you.